So definitely watch as we go through the game. It is not going to be one-sided. Just because Mega Absol has that dark type does not make it a favorable matchup. It's going to be a close game overall. I mean, for yourself, Jesper, you've been there in those big moments when you're making your way towards the final of a major tournament. What's going through your mind as you're reaching these knockout rounds?
I mean, please win the coin flip, the opening coin flip. Both of these decks want to be going second, but second of all, open with a hand with options. And I can say as much for viewers back home who was watching the Las Vegas Regional Championships and saw the deck that Tord won with, I am pretty sure that what Yushigi has brought is the same 60 that Tord won Las Vegas with. So it's tried, it's tested, and going into Gardevoird, it is a very, very close matchup. Absol having that weakness advantage, but can be swung back.
As we see the prize cards going out, nothing too crazy jumping out. Maybe the rare candy could come in vital at some point. But both players proving their lists are tried and tested from historical results. And it will be Pedro to kick things off, going first as our top 4 match begins here at LAIC.
It's time to make some history. Speaking of historicalness, this is bound to be one.
And the first turn for Pedro. Going to be doing a nest ball to go into that deck. Starting the Monkey Dory, Yveltal on the other side. As you mentioned, the list that Tord Reklev won Las Vegas with could go back-to-back at major tournaments if Yoshiyuki makes it all the way. Meanwhile, on the other side, Gardevoird combined with Jellison, a great combination, one that we were all thinking, hang on, we're giving Gardevoird another card that's incredibly powerful, and then the Mega Evolution set opened up more options. But Gardevoird EX, for those of you unfamiliar, it's all about that Psychic Embrace.
And that Psychic Embrace being able to charge up attackers. We were mentioning Jellison being able to deal with those damage counters, but most importantly, with Psychic Embrace, what you're powering up is that Monkey Dory's Adrenaline Brain. That Monkey Dory's Adrenaline Brain has been what has skyrocketed Gardevoird into the orbit, being able to use an ability, as long as you have a Darkness Energy attached to that Monkey Dory, being able to move up to 3 damage counters from your Pokemon to your opponent's side. But hey, how do we get those into play? Psychic Embrace spawns those damage counters for us whenever we attach it on the field. So just incredible synergy here.
Not a bad attacker too. That Mind Bend can sometimes come in a pinch. But at first, Monkey Dory was included in the deck as sort of a 1 count, maybe 2 count, and then it went up to 3. And then at one point, we even saw 4 Monkey Dory in the deck, now sort of stabilized around that 3 count, as it seems to be the perfect amount to maneuver the damage around. As that deck check, finding out the rare candy is prized, and rare candy a way to get Gardevoird into play a little bit quicker. Otherwise, you have that Technical Machine Evolution as a 1 count. So leaning more into the rare candies here in this deck, as there are 2 available. So important to check through the deck as we see the Ultra Ball and the Nest Ball to find those important Pokemon. And this is something we're seeing quite frequently now because the deck is trying to thin cards down for that Mystery Garden. We're seeing Ultra Balls often being used early on to allow that Mew EX to restart cards into the hand in a pinch. And how often do we see Gardevoird getting out of a tough starting position thanks to that Mew EX?
We saw that almost in the last matchup with Sebastian Lashman also playing Gardevoird. So we have multiple tastes during this tournament. But you know what? What's the perfect way to start off as a Mega Absol Kangaskhan player? That is that Precious Trolley starting that raw in your hand. No need to use Arven to get it. You just go ahead and fill your bench right up.
The first turn for this Mega Absol deck tends to be fairly simple. Get all your Pokemon out, get a Turbo Energize attached, and an Energy, and get those Energy into play. And there is Energy in hand, there is a Precious Trolley here. So the question is, do you have access to that tool?
I'm pretty sure I saw an Arven, Mike. So Yoshiyuki starting off top 4 exactly just as he wants to. And I mean, we're going to be able to see the full power of this Mega Absol deck. And then it's going to be on Pedro. Is he going to be able to strike back at it?
And the synergy of that Arven, finding so many important pieces, whether it's the Precious Trolley normally, there's also things like Poker Gear, which often seem like just a consistency card, but when you can search for an item that allows you to find future supporters, it synergizes so well in these scenarios where you have a spare item to search off the Arven. And
it's also another deck you get, a card you get to thin out. You have so many different supporters that you want for different situations. When we're looking at Yoshiyuki's list, we have the 4 Bosses orders, we have Iono, we have Lilies, and we have Arven, right? So Arven is your go-to early game supporter, getting typically Precious Trolley, you know, unless you start within your hand, that's not too bad, but also getting that TM Turbo Energized. That is what you want off that Arven to be able to accelerate and have that Absol going as soon as possible.
Yeah, these technical machines have been a part of our format, whether it's the Evolution, the Devolution, and now that Turbo Energized, really opening up this deck. The main downside of Mega Absol and Mega Kangaskhan is the 3 energy cost for their main attacks. And with that Turbo Energize, it allows you to bring that energy into play on that first turn. And typically you'll do it with one of those larger Pokemon like Mega Kangaskhan. One of them is prized. We do have a Poké Gear prize and a Bravery Charm, so some important cards that are useful as the game goes on. But none of them a singular copy, and I think that's the key to this deck. So many of the important cards feature as 2 copies rather than 1, just to improve that consistency around prizing.
Yeah, especially with most of the one-off cards, you'd be all right pricing it. Psyduck, useful in those Dustin situations. Not going to be using that for the rest of the top 4, I can tell you. But Blood Moon or Luna, late game card, you have time to draw it off prizes if you need it. The Petron, we have the coverage with the Latias, or you can do the double combo here, which I really do love, where you get the maximum amount of movement. But Petron, also a really, really good attacker into this matchup, being able to have that dark typing to take out potentially Gardevoird or something like Brett Tonneson did early in the day, take out Mew.
So we'll be getting the full bench, the perfect combination. We often see this bench of 5 with the Yveltal in the active. 1 Monkey, 1 Latias, a Petron, a Mega Absol, and a Mega Kangaskhan. It allows you to have full mobility around, so you can run errand every turn. And as suspected, the Poker Gear was taken off of that Arven for future turns, and now some draws with that run errand. And this is where the deck starts to feel really consistent. You've already got the setup down, and you're drawing cards each turn.
And one combo we did see earlier, and that's why I'm kind of looking at that Mist Energy as one of the key pieces for this matchup. And that's because of that Mew with the genome hacking. Pedro has a lot of different attackers that can one-hit knock out your opponent's Pokemon. But that could also be the Mew using that terminal period of Absol. And that's why I want to be looking at Yoshiyuki's part to see how well can he assure that Absol does not get knocked out in one hit.
And that is the perfect turn for Yoshiyuki. And Pedro letting out a breath there of frustration potentially at how slow the start was with that low hand size. Does have the Iono, but when you're playing with limited resources at this early stage, 1 Mega Absol Claw of Darkness could completely squander any hope you have to be able to set up your attackers. And that hand off the Iono is not looking particularly strong. There's just some energy in supporters, as well as that Artisan. So able to set up a little bit here, but really needed to start finding ways to discard those energies.
And this could also be the opening for Yoshiyuki. You're mentioning Claw of Darkness. If we get into a Claw of Darkness next turn, could be able to snag either that Arven or Iono. I would probably say the Arven, since that could be getting that secret box. And with Iono, it's random what cards you draw. Arven gives you a certain search, and if you can kind of get rid of that certain search, you know what's going to happen? You're going to make it much harder for Pedro to get that full setup of 5 energies, Drifloon, Darkness Energy, and get the knockout.
And interestingly, the Yveltal was the attachment with the Dark Energy for the Turbo Energize. Why might Yoshiyuki be looking to put a Dark Energy on that Yveltal at this stage?
There's a great argument to be attacking with it later to draw out the resources from Pedro, right? If we're looking at it here, the clutch attack could be, used on Mew, and Mew can't do much against it but genome hacking and attack it back. You can also stick Gardevoirds in the active depending on how many energies that Pedro has been using throughout the games or have a discard pile.
Yeah, just asking the question of Pedro, can you deal with that if it ends up being a route for the deck? But Mega Kangaskhan put into the active, as we mentioned, that Latias EX with the Skyliner in combination with the Petron EX, able to have full mobility and a run errand to draw 2 cards with that Mega Kangaskhan. Each turn, Yoshiyuki will be adding 2 cards to the hand. Later on, might even have the Pheasantipty EX. So despite having just the draw on these big Pokemon, it does open up so many options. So after that Iono, the hand has been refreshed, so a new Arven is being played. This time getting some of those energy back that were missing from the previous hand. And you mentioned that Mist Energy that was in the previous hand, how vital that is. Why might Yoshiyuki need the Mist Energy on the Mega Absol EX?
Terminal period is an effect attack, and Mist Energy said it prevents effects. Now what Pedro can do is he's going to be able to be using this Mew's genome hacking here. And if you can get 2 Monkey Doors set up with Darkness Energy, which was missing the last turn, you can move 60 damage onto that Mega Absol and then abuse that terminal period attack against itself.
Well, on this occasion, thanks to the Iono, won't have the Mist Energy available, just instead using a Fighting Energy, which, if Pedro wasn't aware of which flavor of Mega Absol Yoshiyuki was playing, will now be aware that it's the Cornerstone version, as we have seen a variety of types at this tournament, including the Crustal, as well as the Frillish build earlier on. But there we go, Petron EX going to be subjugating Chain, moving that Mega Absol EX into the active, poisoning it, and now we will see the attack swinging through.
Yoshiyuki's going to be saying, Pedro, show me what you got, and it's going to be probably a choice between discarding Iono or Arven. I don't imagine discarding Psychic Energy would be helpful for Yoshiyuki's own case.
Yeah, it is just going to be between those 2 supporters. And the Arven looking to be the card of choice. And discarding a card from your opponent's hand is one thing, but it's also the information you gain. You get to look at your opponent's hand and find out what resources they have for the next turn.
You also get to see, what kind of situation they're sitting in. We've seen some of these Mega Absol decks also play Eerie, which is a almost disgusting combo. Whenever you go Eerie, discard some items, you're like, hey, your hand's looking quite poor. I'll just get rid of that supporter on top of it with that Claw of Darkness. And it gives a certain control aspect of it. Meanwhile, you have such a sturdy attacker in the active position that, from Pedro's perspective right now, has not gotten a really good setup. And when you don't have that really good setup, it's just a matter of time before that Claw of Darkness just claws itself the way through Pedro.
You mentioned about the genome hacking, copying terminal period of Mega Absol. It does require the 6 damage to be on the Mega Absol, and without Dark Energy on either of those Monkey Dory from the previous turn, it won't be accessible for now. So perhaps that's why Yoshiyuki was comfortable without that missed energy. Not that he could have chosen it if possible, but Gardevoird EX does enter the field for Pedro, which is the start of the journey for Gardevoird. It's now about using those various attackers throughout the game.
And one thing that can happen, though, if Pedro does not have a really good answer to Yoshiyuki getting 5 cards off this Iono, if Yoshiyuki can pull something like a Boss's Orders and already start bullying these Gardevoirs, it would mean that Pedro needs to get something like Red Candy Gardevoir. But you know what? That's going to be really difficult whenever Yoshiyuki is just clawing cards out of Pedro's hand.
How many Boss's Orders are in this Mega Absol list?
Oh, the full slate of 4.
So the likelihood of seeing those when you've got 2 draws from that Mega Kangaskhan every turn, it's pretty likely. And every turn that goes by, Yoshiyuki is able to add energy to the board, which helps protect around that penny scenario where you want to pick up any damage that's in play. So very much at the moment feels like Yoshiyuki is in the driver's seat. But once Pedro now has the Gardevoird in play, it allows for all of these attacking options to be available. Mind Bend isn't an option in this matchup because the active Pokemon can so easily reset, so you don't have that ability to win turns back through confusion.
And it's also, when we're speaking of Mind Bend, yes, it's not going to be able to do that, but why? It's because we have the safety net of Latias plus Petront. You're going to be able to retreat with the Latias down into the Mega Kangaskhan, draw 2 cards, and just like we saw last turn, then we use the subjugating chains from that Petront there to move back into the Absol and get that poison counter. Even though you're taking 10 damage from poison, well, you give ourselves damage. What do we do with that damage counters? Well, we just use our own Monkey Dory and get rid of it again.
What an amazing deck, created and popularized by Tord Reklev and piloted to success in Las Vegas, winning the tournament last weekend. But now Gardevoird EX is going to be attacking straight into that Mega Absol from Pedro. This seems like a crazy idea when you think about how easy it is for the Absol to knock out straight back, but Pedro really trying to put the pressure on and deny this Absol EX from staying in the field for too long.
It is a situation where if Mega Absol takes the knockout on Gardevoird, if Pedro can then get a new Gardevoird into play next turn, then that Absol is going to be taken out back, and then it will be tied on prices. So it's an alright move to be making here. The question then that comes to Yoshiyuki, is this a bait move? Or am I going to take the bait here? And most likely, it depends, right? The Petron has not gotten to a point yet where it's going to be able to take out the Gardevoird. And what would happen if Yoshiyuki decides, well, I'm just not going to deal with this Gardevoird? He probably needs to do something about it, which means attacking this turn is probably the likelihood into that Gardevoird.
Yeah, an interesting line from Pedro. This is the disadvantage of these Megas. They give up 3 prize cards, so sometimes just swinging into them is enough to continue the game. As the Mega Kangaskhan comes into the active, and we'll be drawing 2 cards with that Run Errand. As we see the hand looking reasonably good. You know, this is the advantage of that Run Errand, is you constantly are topping up your hand, even after Lily's Determination or an Iono. And it will be that Mega Absol EX coming back into the active. Is there an energy in hand to attach? And I don't think there was an energy, so missing the energy attachment for this turn, but we'll be getting the Claw of Darkness knockout on the Gardevoird, and there is a Gardevoird in that hand.
And you know what? Pedro needs a Gardevoird to be able to take out that Mega Absol, but that Arven could also be getting something like a Night Stretcher. Nestball can be getting Fescendipity, so this is actually a really difficult discard. Getting rid of the Arven, even though that might be seeing a bit counterintuitive, getting rid of the Arven gets rid of the Sure Fire Wave, getting a Supporter. Okay, then we know that the Absol is going to be knocked out during this turn. That's something that Yoshiyuki is saying that I'm all right with. Then we have to start finding ways. If Pedro ties up the game now, and Absol gets knocked out, that's where we're going to be seeing Petron being able to take 2 prizes on an upcoming Gardevoird EX. And then you can find the last prize for something like Blood Moon Luna and Boss's Orders. So there is a clear prize map here.
Yeah, remembering back to that energy switch of the Yveltal's Dark Energy across to the Petron, Yoshiyuki would have loved to have been able to get an extra attachment last turn to set up that Petron, but at this time it's just 1 energy attachment away from knocking out the Gardevoird in return, or maybe even the Mew EX, depending on what Pedro wants to attack with at this time. So an interesting map here from both players. There is also the Iono that is going to be a factor here, because yes, Yoshiyuki's got a deck that is able to draw cards with that Run Errand, but it's not many cards, and if as the late game starts to come through and this disruption comes through, it could very much swing back into Pedro's favor.
It could, yeah, and it's really down to now, this turns into a game where does Yoshiyuki get what he needs to get? If he doesn't, that's where Pedro's opening comes. Gardevoird is a very good deck of playing off the board, as we say, and that's where, you know, Iono doesn't hurt Gardevoird as much when it's set up. Iono can hurt all of these other decks that need to draw into pieces like Boss's Orders. I mentioned Blood Moon Luna. That could also be Nest Balls. That could be any singular thing you need. Next turn, we have to look at an energy for that Petron to be able to attack it all.
And there we do see the Iono. That is the 3rd Iono played by Pedro. So looking to try and disrupt once again. There is the full 4 copies of Iono in his deck, but one of them is prized. So this will be the last Iono of the game, most likely, as the final Iono is right at the top of the prize cards. Each player shuffles their hand and puts it on the bottom of their deck, and they draw the number of cards equal to the number of prize cards remaining. So in the late game, Iono can be really disruptive.
And it's just a question here, like, I mean, Pedro cannot be attacking with this Gardevoird EX. Even though you're giving Yoshiyuki just 3 cards, there is a Mega Kangaskhan and a Latias in play, being able to use Run Errand. And when you knock out this Absol, 1 energy attachment is going to be able to knock out that Gardevoird due to that darkness weakness. And that's why we always talk about, can Gardevoird beat these dark attackers? And we've been seeing the answer to that question be both yes and no.
Interestingly, getting rid of that Pheasantipity of the secret box. So not wanting to put that in play in case it becomes a target for the clutch maybe. Just recognizing all of those different scenarios. But secret box, discarding 3 cards and finding 1 of each trainer type, an item, a tool, a supporter, and a stadium. That is the ace spec of choice for Pedro and most of our Gardevoird players out there in the field, as it is so consistent in these important turns. We need to find lots of different resources. Typically, early on in the game, you want to see that secret box, but even late game, it can be useful to set up those final turns.
It definitely can, and here we're seeing in more mid-game secret box, getting that full setup, right? We want to be taking this knockout with a 1-price attacker, presumably, being able to use the Knife Stretcher, and we could be getting more support in terms of the Gardevoird line. If this active Gardevoird gets knocked out next turn, we need to get something like a Ralts into play, which we see right now, to be able to use Rare Candy Gardevoird. And luckily for Pedro, the bottom of the prize cards are Rare Candy and Ralts, amongst either getting Vessel or Psychic Energy off the prices, so the prize cards are going to be helping Pedro a lot here when he gets to take them.
110 HP left on that Mega Absol, so that will just be a Monkey Dory Adrenabrain and a Roaring Scream for 80 combination to make the knockout. Typically, Screamtail used to take knockouts on the bench Pokemon, but on this occasion will be to take on the active. And by leaving 30 HP left on that Screamtail, it's out of range of that Yveltal's 20 damage to move across. So playing around the board currently, and will be able to take a knockout. Doesn't need to move any damage across at this stage, can leave that in play for next turn.
Yeah, we're looking at it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 340 damage. And that's going to be the knockout onto Mega Absol. One thing that could have been happening from Pedro, which I would have liked that could have disabled that flip the script from Pheasantipity, was to move 10 damage counters away from the Screamtail since the Mega Absol had 110 HP left. If a Pokemon suffers a knockout due to poison, which is during Pokemon checkup, Pheasantipity's flip the script does not work. So it could have potentially moved 10 damage counters away from the Screamtail to, I don't know, wherever on the board that isn't that Absol, and then being able to take that knockout on poison, leaving Yoshiyuki a tiny tad more stranded.
Yeah, could have done it a whole lot of different ways there, and you're right to recognize the Pheasantipity EX could come down for Yoshiyuki this turn and help him get out of that Iono down to 3. I think the poison tick, something that people often forget about because it's just sitting there on the active. It's almost damage that's irrelevant most of the time, but while the Absol was sat there poisoned, it was 10 damage away from taking another tick. So you see going through the deck now, using that Artisan to try and find any resources, maybe even shuffling because recognize that that previous hand had some useful resources. So just going to be looking to try and close out this game in the next few turns. 3 prize cards remaining for both players. Nothing on board that's really easy to attack with for Yoshiyuki. He needs to find an energy for that Petron EX. Meanwhile, Pedro has everything on board ready to attack.
There is, though, one energy can also get the clutch for the knockout onto Screamtail. Something that it has in common with all of these other psychic attackers is that darkness weakness, so we can still be able to take that out. Although, that means we can just be taking out the Petron, and that would leave Yoshiyuki truly stranded if so. So, what Yoshiyuki wants is that, yes, the boss plus the energy combo, and Run Errand, maybe be able to get that. There's a Nest Ball. That could give the Pheasantipity plus 3 cards.
That could be huge at this point. There is an energy in hand as well, so either of those options we spoke about. A knockout is coming through here for Yoshiyuki. It's now about stabilizing for a future turn, as technically, from his point of view, there is one Iono still left in Pedro's deck, as he knows he'll play 4, but it is in the prize cards.
With that energy we already do see in Yoshiyuki's hand, it feels like the clutch knockout onto that Screamtail is a guarantee. That's a good start. And then we can be looking at, okay, we're going to see Blood Moon onto here, because I do imagine that Pedro is going to be targeting this very Petron down here, because that's a thing that could be taking out every single Pokemon come next knockout from Pedro's side.
Well, now looking back on that Poison Tick being the potential for a knockout, that Pheasantipity could completely change the game at this point. This turn there was still access to the knockout, so it didn't affect the current board state, but it's more about next turn that we're really talking about. So we'll see whether the Pheasantipity finds any useful resources here. 3 cards off that flip the script. As we see a few pennies there, which could be useful, but realistically it is just trying to find 2 attackers in a row. There's 1 or 2 ways to do it, and it's up to Yoshiyuki to recognize the best route to victory here, whether it is via that Yveltal, whether it is via that Petron now, knowing that the Blood Moon will be the attacker next turn.
We're going to see here the energy and the boss's orders onto Gardevoird. Just what we ordered here, Mike. And yeah, Yoshiyuki down to 1 prize.
Subjugating Chains, the ability on Petron that is the reason why it's in the deck, but it also has an amazing attack in that Irritated Outburst, which does 60 times the number of prize cards your opponent has taken. In this case, that would be 180 damage times 2 thanks to that weakness on Gardevoird.
Exactly, and here Yoshiyuki, 1 turn away from shoring up this top 4. And by then, would be one game away, but we can't set a Gardevoird. We've seen some of the most crazy comebacks when it comes to Gardevoird decks. Is Pedro able to do that for us right here?
Well, pushes the Ralts into the active. Is there the Rare Candy Gardevoird combo? Has the counter catcher.
There is indeed the Rare Candy, because he took that off prizes, but we just need the Night Stretcher in this case. I do believe that both Gardevoirs are in the discard pile, so we do need to go ahead and get a Night Stretcher to do that. Now, as we said earlier as well, that Festivity is also in the discard pile, right? So it's not going to be able to nest ball for that, even though he has a nest ball in hand. So it needs to look for different options that we can use to get a Gardevoird into play in the first place. And something like Lilies is not going to help, because then shuffling back the Rare Candy and having to draw both at once, that's not really a great thing to do. So yeah, it's going to be rough for Pedro to find a way of actually getting out of this.
And can't even boss or counter catcher anything up to try and deny a turn or two, because there's complete mobility on Yoshiyuki's side of the board, whether it's the Latias or the Petron itself. So going to have to find a way to take the knockout here. And as we mentioned before, an Iono would be key at this moment, but the Iono is in the prize cards, the last Iono. So it's going to be really tough for Pedro to not only get ahead this turn, but hope that Yoshiyuki can't find it next turn.
We can do Mystery Garden. If we do have a Psychic Energy in hand, we're able to use Mystery Garden, draw up to now 6 cards in hand due to these 6 Psychic Pokemon on Pedro's side. And these couple of cards are going to be incredibly important to the future of Pedro's tournament. We do see a Bravery Charm getting attached onto that Scream Tail, and a Counter Catcher being played. On what though? That is the question, because everything has full mobility.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what you get up here. You're always going to be able to find a new active, but it's mostly to get one card out of hand so you can draw even more of the Mystery Garden. A Night Stretcher here would allow the Gardevoird to come into play. Is there one there? There's a Super Rod and an Ultra Ball, so that's the combination required to get a Gardevoird here.
That gets it for you, and then the question is going to be, what do we knock out? When we have this sort of safety net in that Mega Kangaskhan, drawing 2 cards to run Aaron, and flip the script from Festivity, Mike, we need to take out the Petron, yes. But on the back of that, then no matter what, it seems, Yoshiyuki is going to be able to pick up +5 cards, unless somehow we're going to be able to see Pedro pull into a knockout on that Kangaskhan. The max damage here from the Roaring Scream is not going to be enough, it seems. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, you've got the Dark Energy attached to the Monkey Dory. It's going to be plenty of damage to take the knockout here, but it really does come down to all of this turn is for naught if Yoshiyuki has a card in hand to get a knockout next turn, whether it's that Blood Moon, Ursaluna, maybe even the clutch from the Yveltal will be enough. So the Gardevoird comes into play, Dark Energy down on that Monkey Dory. Here we go. Are we going to be able to find a big knockout here on the Petron and deny a future knockout from Yoshiyuki? We'll see. The 2 Psychic Embrace onto the active, puts 4 damage onto that Gardevoird.
It is actually possible with the 40 damage on the Gardevoird here. We do have double Monkey in play. All the damage on 60 on Gardevoird, 120. That is 240 plus 60. And that's going to be the game.
He's taken the knockout on the Mega Kangaskhan. 3 prize cards taken all in one turn, out of nowhere. We didn't think it was in range. We didn't think it was possible. Jesper was doing the maths and saw the line. And so did Pedro as he takes the victory here in the final moments.
It suddenly just appeared where I was like, wait, 240 plus a 60 from Double Monkey. This adds out perfectly. And that is what we see with the Mega Pokemon, right? They're so volatile when we're talking about it. You know, the big reward you get for having such a great attacker. But when that great attacker goes down, we've seen it before in history when they had the tag team Pokemon. Half the game is over when those are taken out. And Yoshiyuki couldn't have done anything to get rid of that Kangaskhan on board. Was just at the prayer moment of, I've removed all your Gardevoirs, Pedro. Can you get a third one going? And that Mystery Garden, you know, gave the Ultra Ball, gave the Super Rod. And yeah, now Pedro, from being so far behind, takes that game 1.
Well, I'd love to see whether there was a penny in hand in that last turn. Yoshiyuki may have thought that the Mega Kangaskhan was safe, because it just seemed impossible to get a knockout on that. But Pedro saw so much in that final turn, but really it was the start where Yoshiyuki raced ahead with a Mega Absol knockout onto a Monkey Dory, then onto the Gardevoird. But it was that next turn where Pedro said, I only need 2 knockouts, 1 3-prize Pokemon to start things off, and I'll get another 3 prizes later on.
We were asking the questions about Darkness Attacker or Gardevoird. Right now, it's 1-up to Gardevoird. And, you know, the Petron getting the knockout with the Irritated Outburst. And this was what we thought, that this game was almost over, right? There's just a Scream Tail in play. We're still needing the whole combo of Candy, Gardevoird, Darkness Energy, and getting the Scream Tail knockout. But everything ended up perfectly to that 300 HP of Mega Kangaskhan, taking that knockout, taking out the second Mega, and thereby taking the second set of free prizes.
Well, Yoshiyuki opted for the boss on the Gardevoird to try and deny as many resources as possible from Pedro. when he had the penny in hand, so could have picked up the Mega Kangaskhan, but was so sure it was safe because it just didn't look like it was in range until right at the very last moment there when the Screamtail hit 240 in combination with the 60 from the Adrenabrain. So great recognition from Pedro to do the maths there.
Maybe it's an irritating moment for Yoshiyuki. Could have gone with that clutch route, taken out the Screamtail, right, and gone penny on the Kangaskhan, but would have left Yoshiyuki way more vulnerable come, for example, a Night Stretcher and a knockout onto that Festivity, needing to get that energy and boss again, or potentially just taking out the Petron, which would have left Yoshiyuki with really just a vulnerable board overall.
Well, speaking of that Pheasantipity, this time Pedro won't get access to it as it's in the prize cards, as well as a Frillish and Jellicent, but tends to be less of a part of this game is that item locking and denial, because the Yoshiyuki deck can function with very few items after that first turn. It's really about the Precious Trolley early on. Otherwise, looking at that, the Turbo Energize, another one prize this time, nothing too crazy.
No, nothing too crazy indeed, and that's what we want to be seeing from these top 4 matches. One of these two players are going to be in our finals. Currently, the favorite to be so is Pedro Pertusi, but again, Yoshiyuki, a Champions League champion, has been in these situations before, been on the back foot and needs to recover. And what I'm thinking is that Pedro almost showed like this was supposed to be a very good matchup for Gardevoird with that start he had last game. But we do see an Arvin, we do see energies. There's no Trolley prize. There's only one Turbo Energies prize, so we're going to be able to see Arvin for Precious Trolley and TM Turbo Energize here.
Completely unlocks the early game. The A-spec of choice is that Precious Trolley. Search your deck for any number of basic Pokemon. Typically we see the full 5 unless there's an important card in hand, and completely set up the game in conjunction with that Turbo Energize, which allows you to accelerate 2 energy into play. A great tool that has added so much power to this deck, allowing you to get energy in play early on, as if you're manually attaching, which we sometimes see when those early turns don't go quite right, often put Mega Absol completely out the game.
But completely out of the game is not what is happening right now. Right now we're having a great start to the game here. Precious Trolley going into with Latias. Gonna retreat into Mega Kangaskhan. Run errand. Gonna be able to draw 2 cards before we go with that attachment and that run. Oh, sorry, the Turbo, TM Turbo Energize here. 2 cards being drawn. Pretty inconsequential speaking of it, but yeah, attachment, TM, and go for Turbo Energize.
On the other side, Pedro didn't do much in that first turn. Just the Lily's Clefairy with the manual attach, which is an interesting start. It does allow you to attack early on as a deck, but you really want to be seeing those routes come down as quickly as possible. And I think it's quite an interesting starting turn going first. We've often seen it be enough to stay in the games. Especially there's certain Pokemon on Yoshiyuki's bench that would get knocked out by that, but it will be the Mega Kangaskhan taking the hit from Lily's Clefairy should it attack this turn.
I mean, they could also be building up towards a 2x free prize grab, right? So it's not out of the realm of possibility that we are attacking with the Lily's Clefairy this turn, but we do see Ultra Ball for Welts, Lily's Determination, draw 8 cards, putting that Mystery Garden in play, and if Pedro gets a lot of playable cards and a lot of basics down, we could also still be seeing some card draw from that Mystery Garden.
How about Lily's Determination? The strongest card out of Mega Evolution set, allowing you to see 8 cards in the early game. Once you take a prize card, you then shuffle draw 6 instead. But for many of our evolving decks, Lily's Determination has just improved their consistency. That's that next level where Research Prior would have the downside of discarding important resources. Speaking of resources, I saw a rare candy in there for next turn, but what can you do to stabilize the board this turn as you're staring down a Mega Absol ready to attack?
We do need to see a second Ralts here. When we're seeing that Mega Absol almost ready at the attack, just need an energy. And with the 4 bosses orders that Yoshiyuki plays, it's not going to be a great surprise for Pedro if there is a boss being played. So Pedro needs to be ready for the upcoming Claw of Darkness that's going to come from that Absol. And be in a position where, yeah, there needs to be a second Ralts. And that's been something that some of these Gardevoird, Jellicent decks have been, you know, on the back foot of when we've been seeing people like Lucas Singh, Aban Ahmed, and Henry Chow. They played the 2-1-2 Gardevoird. Luckily for Pedro, playing a bit of a thicker line.
So just trying to stabilize in this early stage. The first supporter turn, Pedro went first. Generally, these evolving decks really struggle when they go first, unless you find a few Pokemon search cards like Buddy Buddy Poffin, Nest Ball, or Artisan. So it really is that second turn where things start to kick off. And Lily's Clefairy getting the second Psychic Energy, which allow it to attack, and will be doing 160 to that Mega Kangaskhan, which before was the route to that first knockout for Pedro. Just a 2-hit knockout into these 3 prize cards. So it'll be interesting to see whether that happens again.
We see the run errand for Boss's Orders, have Earthen Vessel, already energy in hand, can be going for that Ralts. Even though there's a Clefairy staring you down, the Clefairy is not going to be able to one-hit KO that Absol without any support on the board. You should keep being able to take out the only Ralts that Pedro has.
But it is worrying when that Lily's Clefairy is ready to attack the next turn. You've got to wonder, the Claw of Darkness might be really important after that knockout. So we're just seeing how this turn is stabilizing. This is the key, right? When you're playing these aggressive attacking decks early on, Mega Absol wants to be swinging from as early as turn 2. It's all about stabilizing around it. Where's your next knockout going to come from? Where's your support going to come from? And on this occasion, that Energy Switch plus Bravery Charm will allow a second attachment to go onto the board, and that Monkey Dory really can start healing the damage that's been put onto the Mega Kangaskhan.
Indeed here, and can also be using that energy switch to start powering up the monkey while using the Claw of Darkness to make it a bit more of a moot point that, yes, the Clefairy may be able to attack once more. Again, it's just a question of, do we believe that Pedro is able to go Red Candy Gardevoird on the upcoming turn? Yoshiyuki sitting and pondering a little bit with that energy surge at the top of the hand, thinking, do I need to move this energy over from the Kangaskhan to potentially something like the Monkey Dory to start piling on a few damage counters over?
And with that Bravery Charm as well, could just put that Mega Kangaskhan out of range. Might be paranoid after last time seeing the Mega Kangaskhan go down, but instead looking to set up a future attacker instead.
And a future attacker, that Petron, we saw it last game to, great potential right there. And you know what? I mean, it didn't work out quite last game, but almost did it, giving Petron a second chance of redemption.
Just working out whether the Bravery Charm should be attached to that Mega Absol. Will do so, and has that mobility, working out whether to poison the Mega Absol or just retreat for free with the Latias. Both options are available, and we'll be looking to just use that Skyliner to retreat that Mega Kangaskhan for free and attack with a Claw of Darkness, which will take a knockout onto that Lily Clefairy, but not only that, discard a card from the opponent's hand.
That Red Candy in Pedro's hand looks mighty tasty here, I'm telling you, Mike, because not sure if Yoshiyuki knows how many Red Candy there are being played, but if you're seeing an Ultra Ball Red Candy in hand, you're definitely taking a Red Candy every single day of the week.
Exactly, slowing down the strategy of Pedro, taking 2 prize cards whilst at it as well. So another Ultra Ball drawn here. Looking to try and set up for the evolution. Doesn't have access to that Pheasantipity as it is in the prize cards, which would typically be an early basic you'd search for when you're trying to set up your Gardevoird, help you draw more cards. Instead, we'll be going into the deck to find any other Pokemon off the Ultra Ball.
And this is where that Pheasantipity prize card at the very top of the prize card hurts so much. Won't have any additional auxiliary draw power from that Pheasantipity. Potentially something like the Mew, but that's not going to yield the same results.
Especially if that Ino gets played. You'll see a fresh 6 cards. It'll be hard to put it down to a hand size small enough. You also got to think about the Mystery Garden as well. That's going to allow more card draw too. And actually grabbing the Curlier and going to take the Artisan, put that in play too. So it might be taking a bit more of a slower route here. Going down a Technical Machine Evolution potentially.
Could be very well. I'm not quite sure if the supporter in Pedro's hand was Arven or if it was Iono. Certainly hoping that it's an Iono to be able to draw these cards. Looks like an Iono indeed. That full art supporter right there. Pedro really does love playing all them blink cards, right? But yeah, this Iono is going to be really, really important, right? You're looking at Yoshiyuki. We're expecting him to have boss every single time. But what if he doesn't get boss, right? That's when this Curly can start playing, a little bit more with it. And we have to remember, this Absol can get taken out by a singular Drifloon with a bit of a monkey help, right? And then this Kangaskhan on the bench that has 140 HP remaining, yes, maybe healed by a bit of Monkey Dory action, but if it's within, a Scream Tail window as it is right now, it's going to be super easy to take out, and that's going to be our prize map, right? We can take our prize map free here and free right there.
Nice and simple, really. When you say it like that, it's what it did in Game 1. Gardevoird only needs to take 2 knockouts, and it was on both of those Megas. But this game not looking quite as comfortable for Pedro. I mean, I was sure that Yoshiyuki was taking it in Game 1. But in this occasion, we'll just be using that Technical Machine Evolution. And I think pointing at both Pokemon might look to try and get the Gardevoird in play now or leave it out just to keep a 1 prize board state.
We do have to remember that with Yoshiyuki being on 4 prizes, it's actually quite smart to say we're just going to go double Curlia if so. Otherwise, a boss here to take 2 prizes and then taking 2 prizes with the Irritated Outburst later on a secondary Gardevoird is going to be great here. So really great call out from Pedro, not going for that Gardevoird since it will actually make the game too easy for Yoshiyuki.
And now with those 2 Kelly on the bench, the Monkey Dory in the active looks like the best target with that Dark Energy removal. A classic strategy for many decks into Gardevoird, remove the Monkey Dories. And so we'll now be over to Yoshiyuki, who's going to draw some more cards with that Run Errand as the Kangaskhan swings into the active spot, draws 2, and then we'll move straight back to the bench.
Mike, yet again, we're not seeing any Penny being able to pick up. Something I would have loved this turn was the Penny picking up this Kangaskhan to leave it out of harm's way. Unfortunately here, it's going to be, food for thought for that Scream Tail potentially coming in next turn. And if Pedro can do something like an Iono into a Scream Tail, even with the Lively Stadium bumping up the HP of Mega Kangaskhan, you may be thinking, oh, now it's more safe, but it also bumps up the HP of Scream Tail, which can thereby be able to do much more damage.
So all of those basic Pokemon gaining 30 HP, and that will stay in play for the rest of the game as the Artisan and Mystery Garden in Pedro's deck have both been played and bumped. So now that Mist Energy on the active Mega Absol, a key addition. It seems weird because there's already 3 energy attached, but a 4th has been applied.
Yeah, and then it's because that terminal period. Now Yoshiyuki takes 1 prize here. If Pedro can be able to go for that terminal period on to that Absol, he's going to be able to take free prizes. And again, that prize map we were alluding to a little bit before, if the terminal period takes out the Absol, that would be free prizes, but now it can't. So we're forcing Pedro to go ahead and say, it has to be Drifloon, and then it has to be Scream Tail onto Kangaskhan, thereby making it much more difficult to seal out this game. And Pedro, deep in thought of how am I actually going to be able to pull this out?
So one of the curly are getting knocked out. The Gardevoird being discarded from the hand thanks to that Claw of Darkness. And now Pedro has to rebuild. 3 prize cards down. There is some damage on board, so has some opportunities. Has that Iono, which is a key card in this matchup. The more you can disrupt, the more you can find yourself able to squeak ahead if Yoshiyuki can't find the resources. But with Pheasantipity in play, as well as that Mega Kangaskhan with Run Errand, there is draw on board, so Iono less effective. But as we saw in that last turn, Penny wasn't found, so it will deny resources at times.
You're going to see the nest ball here, and again, I just have to repeat it. Pheasantipity being prized sucks outright here for Pedro, wanting to get those extra free prize cards. And the Night Stretcher could also be a very helpful element, right? So Pedro needs to look at it. Okay, the Absol having 350 HP left. We need to look at something like a Drifloon, a Stadium Bump, and a Bravery Charm, and looking straight at that Golden Drifloon.
Can't even get the Stadium Bump, as that is the last stadium to be playable. Both the Artisan and Mystery Garden gone, that Drifloon coming down. It's just everything right now seems so far for Pedro to climb. And I think at this point, he's just going to try and find a route to victory. Taking out that Mega Absol, one thing that will do is it will give time to Pedro, as all the energy will be removed from play, leaving just that Petron as an attacker.
Oh yeah, Mike, I'm just being outright silly. That Lively Stadium helps so much for the Drifloon, you know, being able to bump that up to a whole 100 HP. We don't actually care about the Stadium Bump. Disregard that. The Bravery Charm is going to be very helpful. Actually, with this Drifloon, you can be able to one-hit KO this Mega Absol and then push it back onto Yoshiyuki. Do you have the answers for it? Yes or no? Getting that Secret Box, getting that Bravery Charm, and now is where we turn the difficulty up a notch.
Well, is there enough energy discarded at this point? That's another question, because we have seen so much in this game already with the Gardevoird being denied from the hand, so there's going to have to be interesting resources taken off of this Secret Box. It's not going to be as easy as just grabbing your Gardevoird or grabbing your energy. Very limited resources, small hand size, no Pheasantipity to build that hand size up. Does look like there's quite a lot of energy in the discard pile, looking through as Yoshiyuki just did there. But there we go, 2 Psychic Energy taken. They will be discarded with the Secret Box. So where last game Pedro was able to find a knockout out of nowhere, that could be the case again in this game.
Yeah, and we look at it here. There could have been, if the energy switch wasn't used for Yoshiyuki, there could have been a way where if the Drifloon takes too much damage, right, we could have been attaching to the Monkey Dory, using Adrenaline Brain, moving it over and taking the knockout on Drifloon, then using energy switch back to that Petron, and then going boss. We could have been able to do free prizes in one turn, thinking that this Curlia was going to turn into Gardevoird. That's not going to be an opportunity, which means that taking free prizes for Yoshiyuki is not going to be possible in the upcoming turn.
Well, there's the Bravery Charm committed to the Drifloon. Literally the final few resources. The only thing left in Pedro's hand is a Lilies for next turn. As the Drifloon moves into the active after that retreat, we'll be able to move 30 damage across, which will put Mega Absol down to 320. But Balloon Blast was the initial attacking partner for Gardevoird when it first came back out in Scarlet and Violet base set. It's that Balloon Blast for 30 times the number of damage on this Pokemon, and that Bravery Charm increases the HP, as well as the Lively Stadium in this scenario. So able to get 120 damage on the Drifloon, which will put it in a situation where it can take a big old swing, and 10 damage moved off the Drifloon. Just recognizing that a win could be taken next turn by returning some damage back. So 110 times 30, 330, the clean knockout on the Mega Absol.
And this time playing around the Pheasantipity, taking the knockout via Pokemon checkup with that poison. That Pheasantipity on Yoshiyuki's side, even though, you know, Pedro's put themselves into pole position for this game, that Pheasantipity is not going to be able to draw cards. Only the Run Errand we are seeing from Yoshiyuki now are we going to be able to have in response.
Needs to find a Penny at this point. A Penny will allow so much in this scenario, just getting rid of that Mega Kangaskhan, which was a liability during the last game, and it doesn't look like he's found one.
No Penny here. Iono, it almost needs to be some sort of desperation Iono. Pedro didn't unprize that Pheasantipity, which would have helped a lot in terms of the availability that could come from potential nest balls. But Mike, again, it has to be Iono. And then again, Pedro would need to have a good response off these free cards. Screamtail is, you know, more so the obvious one, right? We do see the benching of the Blood Moon as well. But yeah, Iono has to be. And Pedro, you gotta get some answers.
I mean, there's an interesting scenario here where Pedro only plays counter catches as a way to gust. So lots of scenarios to play around, and we'll be going into that Petron, taking the knockout on the Drifloon. So Pedro now denied a Drifloon attack next turn. Will be looking to try and complete the game once again, as he did previously.
There are so many outs for Pedro in this case. Counter catcher, Arven, any draw supporter. Pedro, there's so many outs.
Well, without that Pheasantipity, it's making it harder and harder, but I can see in Pedro's face, he knows there's a way to potentially see it. There is an Iono in hand.
free cards are better than no cards, but yeah, benching that second Monkey Dory. And are we going to be able to see free cards from that Ion catcher and being able to use Adrenabrain and Gardevoird? Doesn't even need the Adrenabrain to be taking out that Kangaskhan on the bench, but yeah, free cards.
3 cards to try and find a win condition. There's so many ways to do it. Are you going to find it? What have you got? There's an Ultra Ball. Will that find
There's a Mew?
Is there going to be a Mew opportunity here? We've got the Screen Tail as well. There's so many ways to find more cards at this stage.
Mew, Monkey Dory, Ultra Ball. Gonna Ultra Ball away the Mew.
Can
Screen Tail
get it onto the Mega Kangaskhan, and that's it. Pedro Patusi is going to be making his way to the LAIC finals.
Such game states we saw here from Pedro, being on the back foot in both games. Yoshiyuki with the perfect starts, the Arven, the Energy, the Precious Trolley, and the TM Turbo Energize. Pedro